It's time for another story, yeah! That was my idea for a new theme song. What do you think? Buddy and I are back for another week to tell a new story. Buddy is looking for squirrels. Oh gosh, there must really be one out there. But we are also looking forward to telling you guys this new story. And it's about a very special ritual that is still practiced today. So can I put you down so that you can look for squirrels and I can tell them a story? Does that sound okay? Is there a squirrel? Oh, okay. So how many of you know what a ritual is? If you think you know, pause the video and share your idea with somebody that you're watching with. And I will think about what my idea is. Okay, I think I know it. A ritual is something that you do regularly, meaning at the same time or in the same way, and you do it all the time. At that particular time, in that particular way, it is always going to be the same. So can you think of something that you do, or an activity that you do at the same time or sort of in the same way, maybe every day of the week, or maybe even once a year? Our story today is about a very special ritual that's a celebration that the Jewish people do once a year, and that celebration is called Passover. So let's get into the story Bible and we'll hear the story of Passover. The plagues. God gave Moses a big job. Moses had to stand up to a very stubborn king who was making God's people work as slaves. God told Moses to go to the Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh said, "No, I will not let God's people go." Pharaoh wanted the people to worship him, not God. So God used 10 ways, called plagues, to change Pharaoh's mind. God turned the Nile to blood. The river began to stink. Pharaoh watched the river turn red, knew his people could not drink, and Pharaoh still said, "No!" God sent frogs to hop everywhere, even into the beds. Pharaoh heard his bakers scream when frogs jumped out of their breads, and Pharaoh still said, "No!" God thought gnats might change Pharaoh's mind so the people could go free. Gnats swarmed people, goats, and cows. There was no place to flee, and Pharaoh still said, "No!" Flies thought God will do the trick, and so God sent a zillion. Pharaoh's house filled up with flies. Outside there were 1,000,000, and Pharaoh still said, "No!" God now struck down Pharaoh's herds. The camels all were ill. The donkeys, horses all got sick. His cows fell down, but still... And Pharaoh still said, "No!" Oozy, gooey, icky sores on everybody's skin. God knocked and knocked on Pharaoh's heart. Pharaoh never let God in. And Pharaoh still said, "No!" Hail pounded, thunder crashed. Pharaoh's plants laid down. Not a tree stood anywhere. All were on the ground. And Pharaoh still said, "No!" "Let my people go," said God, "or I will send a swarm of locusts to devour what's left, to do your land more harm." And Pharaoh still said, "No!" Now darkness covered Pharaoh's land. The sun did not appear. No one could move, no one could see. Still Pharaoh would not hear. And Pharaoh still said, "No!" The last and saddest plague of all brought sobs throughout the lands. Parents cried as their children died. Finally, Pharaoh changed his plans. Pharaoh let God's people go. So the story of Passover is just a little story in the bigger story of how the Jewish people went from being slaves in Egypt to being free. The story this week is about that very last bit, that very last terrible thing that God made happen so that the people in Israel could be set free by Pharaoh. When God sends death to kill all of the firstborn of anything that was in Egypt at the time. That wasn't just people, that was also animals. Everything that was the firstborn was going to be killed. But God told Moses, who then told the Israelites, that there would be a special way that the people, the Israelite people, would be saved. And that was if they killed a lamb, so like a baby sheep, and put the blood over their doorframe on the outside, so that when death was going through and killing all the firstborns, it would pass over the houses of anyone that had the blood of the lamb on their door frame. So that's where we get the name Passover for this holiday. And as part of the holiday, they would eat and like roast the lamb, and they would eat it. And they also ate bitter herbs. That's part of the story. And a bitter thing doesn't really taste very nice. And the reason they were eating bitter herbs was that so they could remember the bitterness, right? The not so niceness of slavery, of being slaves. And they also ate this thing called unleavened bread. Now bread, you have to add something called yeast to, and that makes bread get all nice and pillowy and soft. But if you don't add yeast, it'll stay kind of flat. If you've ever had like a really hard, crispy cracker, right? There's not a lot of yeast in there, maybe even none at all. And it just doesn't rise, it doesn't get all pillowy. And because you don't have to wait for it to rise and get pillowy, it gets ready a lot faster. And something else that had to get ready fast were the people of Israel, because they had to be ready for Pharaoh to say, okay, enough, God, take your people out of here, Moses, goodbye. So now the Israelite people recreate that meal once a year as a celebration, a ritual celebration that they can do to remember the important thing that God did for them by helping them get out of slavery. Can you think of any of your favorite rituals that you have? You talked about them earlier. My absolute favorite when I was your age used to be making Christmas cookies. My mom would make all of the dough, and we would pick the cutouts we wanted to use, and then we would make all the icing and decorate each of them, and we did it every year, usually on Christmas Eve. And it was just a ritual, and it helped me remember that bit of Christmas as a nice thing where my whole family was together and we were all able to celebrate as one group. And so that Christmas ritual is really nice, and it helps me remember all of the good things about Christmas. But there are other rituals that we do because they help us get ready for things. Let me see if I can think of any. One important ritual that we all should do is brush our teeth. And we do this so that our teeth can be healthy. And so we have a really nice smile. And because if we have bad teeth, it can be worse or don't open our eyes. So it is really important. Another ritual some of us have is to read a book before we go to bed. I like to read on my chair, on my landing, with my little lamp. I'll put my feet up and I'll take my book and start reading. And sometimes Buddy insists on sitting with me. It can make it a little hard to read sometimes because his nose is always in my books. Can I read, please? You want me to read to you? The episodes of the story are tied together by linked set. This is not going to be your kind of book. Waking up at the same time every day can be a ritual too. It helps you be ready for the day and get everything you need to get done and be ready to go. That's actually a really important part of our ritual of Passover that we're learning about today. You ready to wake up? I decided to tell the rest of the story from up here in my comfy chair, my reading chair. That's an important part of rituals. We always do them the same. Just like waking up and needing to have that as a ritual and be ready to go for the rest of your day. The people in Egypt, the Israelites, had to follow this ritual exactly to the T. They even had to have their clothes and their shoes and their walking stick ready to go so that when Pharaoh said, enough, you guys can leave, they would be ready to go. So just like waking up in the morning is a good ritual to help us get ready to go for the rest of our day, Passover is a ritual for the Israelite people, helps them remember when they had to be ready to go and leave Egypt and escape slavery the second that Moses told them it was time. And the cool part about Passover is that it's been done the same for thousands of years. Here's some pictures of what Passovers look like, and I hope that you can tell that while they may look a little bit different from place to place or house to house, the same features are there. There are always people gathered together. They're always going to be eating food as a group, and they'll always be remembering the story that we heard in the story Bible today about God not abandoning the Jewish people and showing them how to have death pass over their houses. And that's really the most important God truth that we've heard through all of our weeks so far, is that God doesn't abandon us. God did not abandon Adam and Eve. God did not abandon Abram, even though he didn't have any kids. God didn't abandon Joseph, even after his brothers threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery. And God didn't abandon the Israelites, even when they had been slaves in Egypt for over 400 years. God sticks with God's people. God sticks with you. God sticks with me. And God won't abandon Buddy either. He won't. Just like you didn't abandon me when we were lost in the woods up at camp last week. Do you remember that? Yes, I know it was tiring, but you stuck with me. Thank you. So I know that today's story can feel a little bit weird to listen to sometimes. It's nice, it has a happy ending that the Israelites were able to be freed from slavery, but it happened in a very sad way with all of these firstborns needing to die in order for Pharaoh to change his mind. And that can be confusing and hard to understand. I don't even understand it all the time. Buddy doesn't understand it all the time, and you're really smart.
Yes, I'm really quite smart. I'm probably smarter than you.
Probably. But it's okay for Bible stories to be confusing and for you to feel upset about them or maybe even angry sometimes because we can't understand why things happen the way they happen. We're operating with people truths, and sometimes it's hard to understand God truths. But the most important truth that we need to understand this week is that God doesn't abandon us. I think we might start seeing a pattern here. So that's gonna do it for this week. Buddy is asleep on my lap. So I'm not gonna hold him up for anything because he's had a long day. But we will see you next week for another story. Bye.